thought it was going to be edgy, possibly thrillery, certainly dark. Certainly that was what the synopsis I'd sent out to all the agents had suggested. But the book that came out of me during 1997 was none of those things. Inspired by the cultural zeitgeist of the late 90s, I channeled Nick Hornby, I channeled the TV show This Life, I channeled Britpop and Radiohead, I channeled the nights I spent with my boyfriend and his mates in Firkin pubs and eating late-night Peking duck in Chinatown, the other nights in friends' flat shares getting stoned and watching stupid late-night TV shows. I channeled the feeling of being in love in your 20s in the coolest city in the world during the coolest time to be in that city. I used the setting of one of the many London neighbourhoods I'd lived in during my young adulthood, Clapham Junction, and replicated the house I'd lived in there. And then I thought about who else might have lived in that house, in the flats above and below. I thought about the views of the backs of London houses from the trains I sat in to get to my office jobs. A boss at one of my temping jobs told me about a young lover of his who'd messed him about, and I put her in the book. My landlord, when I was sharing bunks with another girl in Holland Park, had taught Ciroc, and I put that in there. My boyfriend and I, on one of our very first dates, had bought fresh bird's eye chilies from Chinatown to make a Thai curry, and ended up having a raw chili eating competition. It was a draw, which I also put in there. And yes, I did once strike up a conversation with a Mancunian butcher in Chinatown. On New Year's Eve 1997, I typed "The End," and early in 1998, I handed my complete manuscript to the agent who'd wanted to see it, and yes, I changed the font. And I thought at that time I really did that it was terrible, and that at the very most she might be able to sell it to a small publisher for a few £100s, and that a few people might read it and think that it was quite quirky and cool. But that is not what happened. What happened is that the agent called me into her office and told me she was going to put the book into a bidding war with 5 of the top publishers. She also told me it was good that the book was set all over one season, as it made the film rights easier to sell. I still sometimes walk past the bus stop in Chalk Farm, where I stood after this seismic meeting with the literary agent, and I remember vividly standing there, 29 years old, in a fake fur coat from Dorothy Perkins, my cheeks burning hot, wondering what on earth had just happened to me. I'd gone into the agent's office as secretarial temp who'd written a book for a bet, and I'd come out as a writer. It felt unreal and unlikely. Had it even happened, I wondered? Was the agent maybe a little mad? But the agent was not a little mad. She told me to rewrite the last third of the book, which I dutifully did, and now it ended with a party which had not been there in the first draft. "Let's call it Ralph's Party," she said. So we called it Ralph's Party, and she sent it out to some of the biggest publishers in the UK and got me a big fat 2-book deal from Penguin, no less. It was published with a bang on May the 6th, 1999, when I was 30 years old. It was reviewed on The Late Review, a highbrow late-night review show on BBC Two. It was reviewed in all the broadsheets. I was interviewed on the radio and the TV. It hit the bestsellers at number 3 and it sold 250,000 copies in its first year. The whole thing was all a ridiculous fairy tale and my feet barely touched the ground for a year or two afterwards. But the real magic has happened since. Somehow I managed to live beyond the hype of that insane debut publication experience and build a career that is still going strong, if not even stronger. I now write the sort of dark psychological books that I thought I'd write back then in the 90s. And wonderfully, many of the people who read Ralph's Party back then, when they were young and finding their way in the city, or even younger still and stealing books off their parents' nightstands, have stayed with me and are reading me now, 25 years later, having grown up alongside me. They even bring their daughters to my book events. But now it's time for Ralph and Jen and Smith and Cherie and Siobhan and Carl to find their way into new hands of new readers and see how they stand up in this very different world. So many things have changed. Nobody in this book has a mobile phone. Nobody uses a computer. But so many other things have changed not a jot. People still live in cities and look for love and get drunk and cry and obsess over things they cannot have and find ways to turn things round. They get on buses and share flats and have terrible jobs and get stoned and kiss people they don't want to kiss. They still live their lives to a soundtrack of music that moves them. They dance and dream and eat raw chilies and stick their heads in the fridge. Except now they'd film it and put it on TikTok. So I hope you enjoy this old book that so many people loved so much back in the 90s and that it resonates still, even in the high-tech, high-stress 2020s.
Prologue. To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.